Dear Esther, the morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck. I remembered nothing but water, stones in my belly and my shoes, threatening to drag me under to where only the most listless of creatures swim.
このゲーム、操作が拡大するぐらいしかないな。あとダッシュもないかな。一体これが何を意味してるのか。O とか H とか元素かな。なんか缶詰みたいのたくさんあるね。ペンキか。ペンキだな。左か右か。とりあえず右に行こうか。これ本当にダッシュないな。シフトをしても、お、やべ、シフト連打しすぎて、変なん出ちゃった。シフト5回ぐらい連打すると、変なん出るんだよね。いけた。
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side, and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later.
なんか光ってる。
The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude. そしてナレーションが全く頭に入ってこない。せめて字幕が欲しいよね。あ、これいける？ダメか。なんか缶詰の蓋みたいのある。
めっちゃあるな。これは、ショッピングカート的な。あ、いや、違うな、これ。魚取るやつだ。
Those islands in the distance, I'm sure, are nothing more than relics of another time, sleeping giants, somnambulist gods laid down for a final dreaming. I wash the sand from my lips and grip my wrist ever more tightly. My shaking arms will not support my fading diaries.
上に行くか。
The mount is clearly the focal point of this landscape. It almost appears so well placed as to be artificial. I find myself easily slipping into the delusional state of ascribing purpose, deliberate motive to everything here. Was this island formed during the moment of impact? When we were torn loose from our moorings and the seatbelts cut motorway lanes into our chests and shoulders, did it first break surface then?
あの赤いのなんだろう。あれも灯台か何かか。
When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid, or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this. To
こ
keep
の
any
ゲー
would-be
ム
rescuers
死
at
ぬと
bay.
かってあるんかな。
The infection is not simply of the flesh.
やめとこう。なんだあれ。祭壇？ストーンヘンジ的な。
I quote directly. A motley lot with little to recommend them. I have now spent 3 days in their company. That is, I fear, enough for any man not born amongst them. Despite their tedious inclination to quote scripture, they seem to me the most God-forsaken of all the inhabitants of the Outer Isles. Indeed, in this case, the very gravity of that term, forsaken by God, seems to find its very apex. It appears to me that Donnelly, too, found those who wander this shoreline to be adrift from any chance of redemption. Did he include himself in that, I wonder? Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life.
この穴がさっき、あそこから見えた
I find myself
とこだよね。
increasingly unable to find that point where the hermit ends and Paul and I begin. We are woven into a sodden blanket, stuffed into the bottom of a boat to stop the leak and hold back the ocean. My neck aches from staring up at the aerial. It mirrors the dull throb in my gut where I am sure I've begun to form another stone. In my dreams, it forms into a perfect representation of Lot's wife, head over her shoulder, staring along the motorway at the approaching traffic in a vacuum of fatalistic calm. ちょっと光ってんね。蛍光塗料的な。ちなみにこれ水に入るとどうなってしまうの？え？あ、びっくりした。死んだかと思った。え？怖い怖い怖い怖い怖い怖い。なんか向こうに座礁した船みたいのあるんだよな。あれ見たいかも。これいけるか？なんか視界真っ黒になってめっちゃ怖えんだよな、水の中。上向けば、いや、浅いか、ここ。あ、いける。あ、深い深い深い深い。ダメだな。いけないわ。あ、ちょ。そしたらば、ここを登っていくか。 The vegetation here has fossilized from the roots up. To think they once grazed animals here, the remnants of occupation being evidence to that. It is all sick to death. The water is too polluted for the fish, the sky is too thin for the birds, and the soil is cut with the bones of hermits and shepherds. I've heard it said that human ashes make great fertilizer, that we could sow a forest from all that is left of your hips and rib cage, with enough left over to thicken the air and repopulate the bay.
Mm-hmm. 聖書かな。俺は戻れないやつだね。あ、ローディング。
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times.
あ、これでチャプタ
But
ー
although
が
I have
進んだ
all
っ
the
てこと？
reports and all the witnesses and have cross-referenced them within a millimeter using my ordnance survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
.貨物船みたいのが座礁してんね。わからん。ここら辺から入れたりとかしないか、さすがに。中には入れなさそうだな。
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
何この罠みたいなやつ。 何を意図してるのか全然わかんないね。多分あの青いペンキはここに来てから書かれたものだな。微妙に読めない。アイランドかんちゃらかんちゃらかんちゃら。
I had kidney stones and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk. Is this what Paul saw through his windscreen?
Wow.
Not Lot's wife looking over her shoulder, but a scar in the hillside, falling away to black forever.
ちょっと落ちてみたいな。落ちたらやばいかな。セーブとかないの？えい。
Come back.
Come back. なるほど。落ちるとああなるんだ。
I've begun my ascent on the green slope of the western side. I've looked deep into the mountain from the shaft and understood that I must go up and then find the way under. I will stash the last vestiges of my civilization in the stone walls and work deeper from there. I'm drawn by the aerial and the cliff edge. There is some form of rebirth waiting for me there.
治療の後かな。
The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either. My heart is landfill. These false dawns waking into the still never light. I sweat for you in the small hours and wrap my blankets into a mass. I've always heard the waves break on these lost shores, always the gulls forgotten. I can lift this bottle to my ear, and all there ever is for me is this Hebridean music.
このペンキは必ずあるね。どういうわけか。あ、これ見たことあるな。帰ってきてない。
What to make of Donnelly, the laudanum and the
い
syphilis?
や、まだ来てないと
It is
こだ
clearly
な。
not how he began, but I've been unable to discover if the former was a result of his visiting the island or the force that drove him here. For the syphilis, a drunk driver smashing his insides into a pulp as he
これショート
stumbled
カッ
these
トしたら
paths, I can only offer
ダ
my
メかな。
empathy. We're all victims of our age. My disease is the internal combustion engine and the cheap fermentation of yeast.
許されなかったわ。
They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose.
チャプターが切り
His
替わったら
fingernails
終わ
were
るかな。
raw and bitten to the quick. They found the phosphorescent moss that grows in the caves deep under the nails. Whatever he'd been doing under the island when his strength began to fail is lost. He'd struggled halfway up the cliff again, perhaps in a delirium, perhaps trying to reach the bothy's fire before curling into a stone and expiring.
船の残骸だね。
Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely
な
to
んか
end.
変な音すんね。
The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
おおおお。
Did Jakobsen crawl this far? Can I identify the scratches his nails ruined into the rocks? Am I following him cell for cell, inch for inch? Why did he turn back on himself and not carry through to the ascent?
鍾乳洞的なやつ？なんかもうすげえ尖ってんじゃん。こんな尖ってるもん？盗作があるってことは人がいたんだろうな。近いうちまだ使われてるし。一旦ここで終わりますか。はい、じゃあお疲れ様でした。